I was covered in grease, sweat dripping down my face as I tightened the last bolt on an old Chevy, my hands shaking from exhaustion. It was past midnight, and I had barely made enough today to put food on the table. My garage was small, barely surviving, just like me. Just as I was about to close up for the night, headlights flashed through the dirty glass windows. A sleek, black luxury sedan pulled up, looking completely out of place in my rundown shop. I sighed, wiping my hands on my already filthy rag. Another late-night breakdown, probably someone who'd complain about the service and tip me nothing. The driver's door opened, and a woman stepped out. Her heels clicked against the pavement, her long, dark hair cascading over her shoulders. She looked rich. The kind of rich that didn't step foot in places like this unless they had no other choice. "Are you still open?" Her voice was controlled, but there was a hint of something underneath. Panic, maybe desperation. I exhaled, rubbing the back of my neck. "Yeah, what's the problem?" She glanced at her car, clearly embarrassed. It just stopped in the middle of the road. The engine light came on and now it won't start. I nodded, grabbing my toolbox. "Pop the hood." She hesitated before getting back in the car and doing as I asked. I could already tell it wasn't going to be a quick fix. I glanced at her. She was watching me closely, arms crossed, biting her lip. Something about her seemed off, but I was too tired to care. "Looks like a wiring issue. It's not an easy fix." I stood up, wiping my forehead. "I can get it running, but it's going to take a while." She sighed, running a hand through her hair. "How long?" "At least an hour." Her shoulders slumped. "Fine." I should have charged her on the spot. People like her had money to burn. But something in her eyes told me she needed this car fixed, and she wasn't about to argue about the price. So, against my better judgment, I said, "I'll take care of it." "No charge." She blinked. "What?" "Consider it a favor." I forced a small smile. "We all need one sometimes." She stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Thank you." I didn't know it yet, but that one act of kindness was about to change my life forever. As I worked under the dim, flickering light of my garage, I kept glancing at the woman. She paced near the entrance, checking her phone constantly. She was nervous. Not in the usual "I'm late for a meeting" way. More like she was running from something. "You okay?" I asked, tightening a bolt. She startled, looking up from her phone. "What?" "You seem on edge." She hesitated before tucking her phone away. "It's nothing." It was a lie. A bad one. I didn't press. I had my own problems, debts, an eviction notice taped to my fridge, and a daughter at home waiting for dinner I couldn't afford. After about an hour, I finally got the car running again. The roar of the engine broke the tense silence, and I stepped back, wiping my hands. "All set." She let out a breath of relief. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't worry about it," I said, already turning back to my tools. She pulled something out of her purse. A thick stack of cash. "Take this." I frowned, shaking my head. I said, "It's free." Her brows knitted together. "But..." "Look," I exhaled, leaning against the car. "Not everything's about money." She studied me for a long moment, then slowly put the money back. "All right," she said softly. "Thank you, Jack," I said. "Jack," she repeated, almost testing the name. "I'm Olivia." I nodded, already moving toward the garage doors. "Drive safe, Olivia." She hesitated before getting in the car. But as she pulled away, I saw it, the way her hands trembled on the wheel. Something was wrong, and I had a feeling this wouldn't be the last time I saw her. The next morning, I woke up to banging on my garage door. I groaned, rubbing my face as I stumbled out of the small cot I kept in the back. "Hold on," I shouted. When I opened the door, two men in expensive suits stood there. They didn't look friendly. "You Jack?" the taller one asked. "Who's asking?" I crossed my arms. "We're looking for a woman. Olivia Bennett." I tensed. Bennett? That name sounded familiar. The other man stepped forward, his expression dark. "She was here last night, wasn't she?" I forced a frown. "I fix cars. I don't keep track of who drives them." The taller one's jaw clenched. If she comes back, you let us know. Understand? I held his gaze.
Sure.
They stared at me for a moment longer before turning and walking back to their car. As they drove off, I let out a breath, my mind racing. Olivia was in trouble. And somehow, I'd just been dragged into it. I watched the car disappear into the distance, my heart pounding harder than it had in years. Those guys weren't just some concerned colleagues looking for a missing CEO. They had the look of enforcers, men who did the kind of work that left people broken or worse. I shut the garage door and leaned against it, exhaling sharply. What had I just gotten myself into? I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the news. If Olivia Bennet was a big deal, she'd have to be somewhere on the internet. And sure enough, there she was. Millionaire CEO Olivia Bennet disappears amid corporate scandal. I clicked on the article, my eyes scanning the text. After reports of fraud and embezzlement at Bennet Industries, CEO Olivia Bennet has gone missing. Sources claim the company is under federal investigation, and authorities are searching for Olivia to answer allegations that millions were siphoned from corporate accounts. Some claim she fled the country, while others believe she's in hiding. I swallowed hard. So that's why those guys were looking for her. The problem was something about it didn't feel right. I remembered the way she looked at me last night, exhausted, shaken, scared out of her mind. She didn't seem like some cold-blooded criminal trying to escape justice. I knew what it was like to be desperate, and something told me Olivia Bennet was desperate. That should have been the end of it. I should have walked away, forgotten I ever met her. But life had a cruel way of making sure I was never that lucky. Because Olivia came back, and she wasn't alone. That night, as I locked up the shop, I caught movement in the shadows. I tensed, my hand tightening around the wrench in my pocket. "Jack," a voice whispered. I turned, and there she was. Olivia. She looked even worse than before. Her clothes were wrinkled, her hair was a mess, and there was a frantic look in her eyes. "Jesus," I muttered, pulling her into the garage and shutting the door behind her. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I didn't know where else to go," she admitted, her voice trembling. "They found me at a motel. I barely got away." "Who?" I asked, though I already had a good guess. She swallowed hard. "They work for my uncle." I frowned. "Your uncle's?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Richard Bennet. He's the real reason I'm in this mess. He framed me. He's been stealing from the company for years, and when I finally caught on, he turned the entire board against me. He's powerful, Jack. And he won't stop until I'm either dead or locked away for a crime I didn't commit." I ran a hand down my face. "And now those guys think I'm helping you?" She looked at me, her gaze filled with guilt. "I'm sorry." I shook my head. "Sorry won't fix it if they come back with guns, Olivia." She bit her lip, looking away. I sighed. I should have told her to leave. I should have sent her somewhere else. But something in me just couldn't. I'd spent my whole life being powerless, losing my wife, barely holding on to my daughter, watching everything I built crumble. This time, I had a chance to fight back. And for some reason, I wanted to. "All right," I muttered. "You can stay. For now." Her eyes widened. "You mean it?" "Yeah," I exhaled. "But if we're doing this, we do it right. First thing tomorrow, we figure out how to take your uncle down." She nodded, determination flickering in her eyes. Neither of us realized it yet, but that decision would change everything. The next morning, I made Olivia a cup of coffee while I tried to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do. "So," I said, sitting across from her, "where do we start?" She hesitated. "I have proof. Files, documents, recordings. But it's on my laptop. And my uncle has people watching my apartment." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "Of course he does." "Jack, I can't do this alone," she admitted. "I need your help." I scoffed. "Lady, I'm a mechanic. Not James Bond." She gave me a look. "You fixed my car without asking for a dime. That means you're a good person. And good people don't let innocent women get hunted down like animals." I let out a slow breath, rubbing my temples. "This is going to get me killed." "I won't let that happen," she said quietly. I studied her. For someone who had everything taken from her, she still had a fire in her. And for some damn reason, I wanted to help her. Fine, I muttered. Let's steal your laptop. Her lips parted in shock. Really? I sighed. Yeah, but if this goes sideways, I swear. It won't, she said quickly. I promise. Spoiler, it went sideways. Fast. We drove to her high-rise apartment, parking a few blocks away to avoid suspicion. See that black SUV? She whispered, nodding toward the curb. They've been watching my place for days. I frowned. All right. New plan. You wait here. I'll go in. Her eyes widened. Jack, no. Olivia, if they see you, they'll kill you. If they see me, I'm just some random guy. She swallowed hard. Be careful. I nodded, then slipped out of the car. Breaking into her apartment wasn't the hard part. The hard part was getting out. Because as soon as I grabbed the laptop, I heard footsteps outside the door. I barely had time to hide before the lock turned, and two men stepped inside. We need to move her fast, one of them muttered. Richard wants this done tonight. My stomach dropped. They weren't just after her anymore. They were planning to kill her. I clenched my jaw, gripping the laptop tighter. If we were going to take down Richard Bennett, we had to do it now. Before it was too late. My pulse pounded as I crouched behind the couch, gripping Olivia's laptop like a lifeline. The two men in the apartment were still talking, their voices low but urgent. Richard wants this done tonight. Those words kept ringing in my head. I had no time to waste. The moment they stepped into the bedroom, I took my chance. Moving fast, I bolted for the door, keeping my footsteps light. I didn't even dare breathe. But the second I stepped into the hallway, hey, stop. Damn it. I ran. I sprinted down the corridor, taking the stairs two at a time. My heart thundered as I heard them behind me, their heavy boots slamming against the floor. Catch him before he gets to the street, one of them yelled. I burst out the exit door into the alley, gasping for air. And then a gunshot. The bullet hit the dumpster beside me, metal sparking as I dove behind it. Oh, hell no. I wasn't about to die for a laptop. I grabbed a loose metal pipe from the ground and hurled it toward the nearest man. It smacked him right in the ribs, making him stumble. That half-second delay was all I needed. I ran for my truck, throwing the laptop inside and jumping in. Tires screeched as I floored it, the engine roaring to life. They were still chasing me, but I was faster. I turned a sharp corner, nearly tipping over, and sped toward Olivia, who was waiting anxiously in the car. Her eyes widened when she saw me barreling down the street. Drive, I shouted as I skidded to a stop. She didn't hesitate. She slammed on the gas, and we tore down the road, disappearing into the night. Breathing hard, I tossed the laptop onto her lap. Got it, I gasped. She exhaled in relief, but her hands were still shaking on the wheel. They tried to kill you, didn't they? I nodded, my jaw tightening. Yeah. And they're not gonna stop. We were in this now. And there was no turning back. We didn't stop driving until we were miles out of town, hiding in an old motel that smelled like cigarette smoke and cheap beer. Olivia opened the laptop with trembling fingers. If the files are still here, we can take my uncle down. I watched as she typed in her password. The screen flickered on. Documents, emails, bank transfers. All the proof we needed. Her breath hitched. Jack, this is everything. I leaned in, scanning the records. Richard had been siphoning money from the company for years, laundering millions through fake accounts. This wasn't just fraud. This was organized crime. My stomach turned. We have to go to the cops. She hesitated. They won't help. I frowned. Why not? She swallowed hard. Because half of them work for my uncle. Jesus. I sat back, rubbing my temples. So, what do we do? She met my gaze, eyes filled with desperation. We go public. I stared at her. You want to take this to the press? It's the only way, she whispered. If we expose him to the world, he won't be able to hide. He'll go down. It was risky. Hell, it was borderline suicide. But what other choice did we have? I nodded. All right. Let's do it. The next day, We reached out to a journalist, someone Olivia trusted. Her name was Claire Mitchell, a tough-as-nails reporter who had a reputation for bringing down powerful people. When we met her at a secluded diner, she eyed us both carefully. "You understand what you're asking for, right? If I publish this, Richard Bennett will want you both dead." "We know," Olivia said firmly. Claire sighed, then glanced at the laptop. "All right. Show me what you've got." Olivia handed it over. Claire scrolled through the files, her expression hardening. "Damn," she muttered. "This is massive." I crossed my arms. "Can you make it go viral?" Claire smirked. "By tomorrow morning, everyone in the country will know the name Richard Bennett." Olivia let out a shaky breath. This was it. We were putting everything on the line. Now we just had to survive long enough to see it through. We left the diner feeling hopeful. That hope didn't last long, because as soon as we got back to the motel, we knew something was wrong. The door was open. The lock was broken. And inside, the room was destroyed. Our bags were slashed open. The mattress was flipped. And worst of all, the laptop was gone. "No," Olivia whispered, stepping forward. I grabbed her arm. "Wait." Then I heard it. A rustling sound. Someone was still here. I barely had time to react before a shadow lunged at me. A fist slammed into my ribs, knocking the air out of me. I stumbled, swinging wildly. My fist connected with a jaw, and the man grunted in pain. But there were two of them. The second guy grabbed me from behind, choking me. Olivia screamed. Adrenaline surged through me. I slammed my elbow into the guy's ribs, twisting out of his grip. Then, without thinking, I grabbed the motel lamp and smashed it over his head. He collapsed. The other guy turned to Olivia, reaching for her. I didn't hesitate. I tackled him to the ground, pinning him.
"Who sent you?"
I growled. He spat blood at me. I punched him.
Hard.
His head snapped back.
"Who?"
"Sent. You?" He coughed, then smirked. "Richard sent his regards." My blood ran cold. Olivia gasped. "He knows." I clenched my fists. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about revenge. The motel room was wrecked, and my knuckles were still throbbing from the punch I'd landed on the guy now slumped against the floor. Blood dripped from a split lip, and his friend wasn't moving after taking a lamp to the head. But that didn't matter. What mattered was what he'd just said. Richard sent his regards. That meant Olivia and I weren't just running anymore. We were being hunted. I turned to Olivia, who was shaking, her breath ragged as she stared at the destruction around us. "We have to go," I said, my voice urgent but steady.
"Now."
But the laptop, she was panicking. "Jack, everything was on there. The files, the proof, everything. We don't have time to worry about that." I grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward the door. "They found us here. They'll be back, and next time, they won't just send two guys." Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her eyes darting around as if looking for an escape. I could see the terror setting in, the hopelessness creeping into her expression. I couldn't let her spiral. I cupped her face, forcing her to look at me. "Listen to me. We're not done yet. We still have Claire. The story is out. We can still finish this." Her lips parted slightly, and after a tense moment, she nodded. I exhaled. "Come on." We ran out of the motel, stealing a car from the parking lot. Nothing fancy, just a beat-up sedan that wouldn't draw attention. My hands were tight around the wheel as I sped onto the highway, pushing the speed limit. "Where do we go?" Olivia asked, her voice small. I thought for a moment.
"Claire."
We find Claire. Because, right now, she was the only ally we had left. We drove in silence, the hum of the engine the only sound in the car. Olivia kept glancing at the side mirror, her paranoia growing by the second. I understood why. Richard Bennett wasn't just some businessman gone rogue. He was a monster, one with enough power to erase people like us off the face of the earth. And we had just declared war on him. I tightened my grip on the wheel. "We have to assume he's tracking us." Olivia swallowed hard.
"How?"
"Your phone." Her face drained of color. I reached out. "Give it to me." She hesitated, but pulled it from her pocket. I took it, rolled down the window, and hurled it onto the highway. She flinched. Jack. Too risky, I cut in. If we're lucky, that'll buy us some time. She nodded, understanding but still rattled. We pulled into a small gas station about 2 hours out of town. Claire had given us an address to meet her at, a safe house she used when working on dangerous stories. I stepped out of the car, stretching my stiff muscles. Stay put. I'll grab us something to eat. Olivia nodded, folding her arms tightly across her chest. Inside, I grabbed a couple of sandwiches and a new burner phone. As I paid, the hairs on the back of my neck prickled.
Someone was watching me.
I turned my head slightly, just enough to catch a reflection in the glass door. A man in a dark suit, sitting in a parked car outside. I forced myself to stay calm. If I ran, they'd know we were onto them. Instead, I walked back to the car casually, handing Olivia the food before getting in. We've got a tail, I muttered under my breath. Her breath hitched. What do we do? I put the car in drive, gripping the wheel.
We lose them.
And then I floored it. I took the dirt road. The car behind us followed, tires kicking up dust. Olivia clutched the door handle, fear in her eyes. Hang on, I muttered. I yanked the wheel, swerving off the main path and into the trees. The sedan barely held together as we bounced over rough terrain. Our pursuers hesitated. Just enough. Then, bam! Their car hit a tree, metal crunching on impact. I didn't wait to see if they were okay. I just kept driving. An hour later, we reached Claire's safe house, an old cabin hidden in the woods. Claire was already there, waiting. You look like hell, she said, arms crossed. We lost the laptop, Olivia blurted. They stole it. Claire wasn't fazed. I figured that might happen. She pulled out her own laptop. I made copies of the files you sent me earlier. We're still in business. Relief flooded Olivia's face. But Richard won't go down easy, Claire warned. He'll fight back. Hard. I clenched my jaw. Then we hit him first. Claire started pushing the story harder. She leaked damning evidence to news outlets. Social media exploded. Richard's empire was crumbling. Then came the threats. First, a message on Claire's phone. Drop the story, or you're next. Then, a brick through the cabin window. He's getting desperate, Olivia whispered. Good, I said. That means we're winning. But we weren't safe yet. That night, I barely slept. Every sound outside made me flinch. Then footsteps. I grabbed the gun Claire had stashed in the cabin. Olivia stirred. What is it? Shh. A shadow passed by the window. Someone was here. I crept to the door, heart pounding. The second it opened, I swung. The man outside crumpled. Another rushed in, gun raised. I tackled him. Gunshot. The bullet missed, shattering a lamp. I wrestled the gun from his grip, slamming him into the wall. Olivia grabbed a knife, ready to fight. The last attacker saw he was outnumbered and ran. I exhaled, shaking with adrenaline. They found us. Claire cursed. We need to end this.
Now.
We went on the offensive. Claire scheduled a live interview with Olivia to expose Richard publicly. If he wanted to silence her, he'd have to do it in front of the world. We do this, there's no going back, Olivia said. I met her gaze. There never was. The interview aired live. Olivia laid everything bare, how Richard framed her, the stolen money, the hitmen. Claire backed it up with evidence. The world erupted. Richard tried to deny it, but the proof was too strong. Then the FBI got involved. We'd won. Almost. Richard disappeared. The FBI raided his office, his home, nothing. Then a call. If I go down, I'm taking you with me. And I knew. This wasn't over. That night, Olivia got a text. A video. Her mother, tied to a chair. Gagged. Richard's voice. Come alone or she dies. She turned to me, pale. I have to go. I gritted my teeth. Not alone, you're not. We met Richard at an abandoned factory. He stood there, smug as ever, his men surrounding Olivia's mother. You really thought you could beat me? He sneered. I stepped forward. You've already lost. His phone buzzed. Claire had leaked more evidence, his offshore accounts, his dirty deals. The FBI were closing in. Richard snapped. He grabbed a gun. If I'm going down, I'll take you with me. The room erupted.
Gunfire.
Shouting. I tackled Olivia, shielding her as bullets flew. Then, Richard grabbed her mother, pressing a gun to her head. Stop. Olivia screamed. I raised my gun. Let her go, Richard. He smirked. Or what? A gunshot. His own men had turned on him. He fell, eyes wide, blood pooling. His empire had crumbled. The FBI swarmed in minutes later. Richard's men surrendered. Olivia rushed to her mother, sobbing. Claire filmed everything. The world watched Richard fall. It was over. Days later, Olivia stood in front of the press. Richard was dead. His crimes exposed. And Olivia? She was free. I stood in the crowd, watching. She caught my eye, smiled. We'd survived. Life slowly returned to normal. I went back to my garage. Olivia took back her company, this time for good. One day, she showed up at my shop. You ever thought about working for me? She asked, smirking. I chuckled.
Nah.
I like grease and engines. She stepped closer. Then let me take you to dinner instead. I raised an eyebrow. Is that a business deal? She grinned. Call it a thank you. The first dinner led to another. And another. Somehow, between running for our lives and taking down a billionaire, we'd become something more. I wasn't just some mechanic anymore. And she wasn't just a CEO. We were partners. Months later, the garage was booming. Turns out, being the mechanic who took down a billionaire was good for business. But none of that mattered. What mattered was her.
Us.
I stood outside the garage one evening, watching the sunset. Olivia leaned against the truck beside me. You ever think about what's next? She asked. I smiled.
Yeah.
I do. She laced her fingers through mine. For the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving. I was living. And it all started with one broken car. One act of kindness. One chance meeting that changed everything. Life had been cruel before. But this was redemption. And I wasn't letting go.